You're listening to the Braver Angels podcast, a new way of talking politics. All right, here we are. I'm John Wood Jr., and I'm joined by my illustrious co-host, the one and only Ciaran O'Connor, live from New York. How you doing, Ciaran?
It's not Saturday night, but I'm good.
That's right. It's not Saturday night. But we're in a moment in American history right now where every day feels like a Saturday for some folks, although maybe not in the happy way that would have been taken in the past. So this is a landmark episode for us. As I said in the intro, this is at the top. This is the Braver Angels podcast. No longer the Better Angels podcast. Better has become braver. And so along those lines, I have a bit of an announcement here to make, a special introduction for our conversation here today, Ciaran, from Braver Angels, right? So here we go. Get ready for my PSA voice. Better Angels is now Braver Angels. While our mission remains the same, to unite red and blue Americans in a working alliance to depolarize America, our vision has evolved. Yes, we need civility in 2020, and yes, we need to treat each other with respect. But that's not enough. At this time of crisis, we need more than empathy and goodwill to overcome the fear, division, and isolation challenging America. We need courage. The courage to see the humanity in our fellow Americans regardless of political party, the courage to endure the vitriol of our political opponents and the judgment of our friends, the courage to bring our country together and build upon what unites us rather than weaponizing what divides us. As Abraham Lincoln wrote during the Civil War, the occasion is piled high with difficulty and we must rise with the occasion. Braver Angels is rising to the occasion. As Americans stay home to protect their fellow citizens, Braver Angels is bringing us together online and helping us find the courage needed to transcend our partisan differences and overcome this challenge. We invite you to join us. Okay, so that, ladies and gentlemen, is an announcement letting you know that the organization that you know and may be a member of, that we have known as Better Angels, has now become Braver Angels. Just a little bit of just a kernel of background here to satisfy any curiosity on this point. Originally, we pivoted in the direction of shifting the name because there was a little bit of a trademark dispute with another organization that had a similar moniker. All that was resolved amicably and so forth, and is no longer an issue. But in the course of that, we started thinking about the mission of our organization. We started thinking about the work that we were doing, and sort of honed in on this question of, well, what is the theme that's really important if you want to bring America together in 2020? And we were having these conversations before the COVID-19 pandemic took off. And what we arrived at was this understanding that, we as an organization have been asking people to be empathetic towards each other, like many other good folks and good groups. We've been asking people to recognize each other's humanity, to speak in a spirit of mutual respect, and to build in terms of how we organize together on that foundation. And we still stand by all those things, right? But the thing that I think we've all learned at this point is that you pay a real price sometimes in American life, in American political life. Sometimes on social media, sometimes in the workplace, sometimes in your own family life, for being willing to see the dignity and the humanity in the person that you disagree with, not just because that person may distrust you and abuse you for it, but because your own friends who think like you do politically, but who think you ought not be fraternizing with the enemy, will punish you for that too. And yet, it takes that kind of bravery and courage to be able to develop the relationships necessary to allow us to be able to endure the substance of our differences. And that's what we have to remember in 2020, Ciaran, and for everybody who's listening, because if we're going to develop a politics that is capable of allowing us to hang together as Americans in a way that allows us to deal with existential threats like COVID-19, not to mention every other major issue that has been threatening our country for a long time, without being debilitated by the weight of polarization, then we've got to be able to have the courage to endure the consequences of reaching out and joining hands with our fellow Americans on the other side. Although don't do that literally, as long as social distancing is something that needs to remain in effect. But Ciaran, that's, I feel like we've rounded a curve here in our understanding of what it is we're doing as an organization. And I think that the Braver Angels podcast needs to drill into that, man. So how are you feeling, buddy, in the age of COVID-19 and of Braver Angels?
I'm feeling pretty good, all things considered. I'm holed up here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm thankful to be feeling healthy and still be able to work with you all. I know a lot of people are facing some incredibly difficult circumstances right now.
Right.
I feel good about Braver Angels. I think that our nation is being tested. The circumstances call for bravery and courage. And I think it's the right time to meet the moment with courage, bravery, and the conviction that this is what we need to do now. Mm-hmm. I think we were already thinking about the notion of bravery and courage in the context of the 2020 election.
Right.
Americans were already seeing messages of fear and division and, frankly, isolation in the context of the political war, the electoral war, what was coming out of the mouths of the candidates and the cable news hosts and so forth. But I think that coronavirus has taken things to a whole new level in which the social, political, and economic effects of this crisis are themselves becoming partisan cudgels and becoming politicized. So I think that courage is more important than ever before, not only if we're going to be able to depolarize, but if we're going to be able to come together as a country and ultimately emerge stronger on the other side of this, right, which is my hope.
Right. Yeah. And so a big part of that courage naturally has to be the courage to have the sorts of conversations that are not always comfortable. And in having the conversations that aren't always comfortable, really being able to sort of lean into the fact that, and this may sound a little bit controversial in civility circles, but to really lean into the fact that, you know what, there is a debate that has to happen in America right now over the future of this country, right? There's a debate that has to happen, and within that debate, there's a lot of nuance to be explored. And one of the real failings of our general sort of political culture is that we don't invite nuanced conversations over many topics. The broader the conversations become, the more we get them through cable news and talk radio and social media and so on and so forth, the more binary everything seems to look. But on the other hand, I mean, the passion over the direction that this country needs to go in and over any of the individual issues is real, right? And so part of what we're doing from an organizational standpoint, by the way, folks, feel free to comment on this podcast wherever it is you're listening to it or on social media. I mean, we really want to know what you all think. Braver Angels members, people out there in the wider universe. I mean, what do you think about this idea of courage as being something that is frankly needed if we're going to create a more sort of congenial, intellectually honest, and functional political society? But on the organizational side, I mean, what Braver Angels is doing at present is launching a series of virtual debate events that are going to be taking place on a week-by-week basis from now, certainly up to Election Day, and probably beyond that, where we are going to be inviting all of you to participate in what is basically sort of a parliamentary town hall style event on subjects that have to do with the 2020 election. So just be on the lookout for that. If you follow us on social media at what is our social media handle? At Braver Angels. On Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, you'll get the updates about that. We're going to be pushing our members and everybody who's not a member alike to come and join in on this discussion, on this unfolding discussion as it goes, and to help us sort of rebuild this kind of political fabric from there. But to just say a little bit about things from my own vantage point really quick. I mean, at this point, a lot of people know something about my background and who I am, but I feel like it's important to kind of connect with where other people are coming from now, to just talk about myself in raw political terms real quick. Can I do that, Ciaran? Is that okay? Can I lift the mask a little bit, so to speak?
Do the damn thing.
Do the damn thing, right? Okay. Well, no shock to anybody who's read a little bit about me, but I am a Republican. I consider myself to be sort of a communitarian conservative. Most people don't even know what that is, right? But basically, for me, it just means that the things that I really care about in terms of politics are not necessarily the things that are the headline issues, right? So, I mean, I think of myself as kind of fiscally conservative. I think of myself as culturally conservative. What I really care about, though, is the way people treat each other and function together in a civil society. What I really care about is the way we go about building up our institutions. What I really care about is virtue and what I would say call morality, right? Not in terms of telling other people how to live, but in terms of like, how do we inform our conduct towards one another? You know, I mean, one of the things I love about America is this idea that you had free people who came to this country from across an ocean, granted all the complexity and so forth, and granted that half of my ancestors were slaves, and that's a whole different but very connected storyline here. But I love the idea that this nation was founded by people who said, you know, we can build a better world, and we can build a better world on principles of liberty and justice and equality and so forth. And for me, that's the prism through which I see America, even if I notice all the problems and pains and recognize the fact that, you know what, this country has fallen short of all sorts of ways in which it was supposed to be different and supposed to be better. Whatever. That's just the project that we're in. It's our generation's time to push it a little closer to what it needs to be. And in the current political environment, you know, I mean, that's just sort of how I see my conservatism. It's not super complicated, you know, and it doesn't make me feel like I've got to be an enemy to you, Ciaran, my dear brother, because you're a Democrat or because you're liberal or because you're progressive. At this current moment, I'm not super happy with the Democratic Party, to be sure, and I'm definitely not very happy with the Republican Party. You know, I haven't been happy with the tone of politics on either side of the aisle for years, and I was a Democrat before I was Republican, let it be known. I think that President Trump he's not a person who conducts himself in a way that really necessarily speaks to what I want to see out of a president in terms of how he behaves. On the other hand, I do think that the president is treated unfairly a lot of times. I do think that there's a media out there that sort of has it out for Trump. And I think that, you know, I don't have to be a Trump fan to recognize that's true, in my own opinion, right? But if you tell me that Donald Trump is the worst thing in the world, I'm more than happy to listen to the point of view. The problem is that we are positioned in a way in America right now to where we're not able to have the tough conversations with empathy so that we can pursue the truth together, right? In terms of what's true about a particular issue, what we ought to be doing in government, maybe what's true about a particular politician or personality. And so that's why Braver Angels is working on setting up this debate culture. This is why we're asking you, the audience, to participate in these weekly conversations. And this is why we're trying to open up Braver Angels and the Braver Angels podcast and Braver Angels media in a way to where we let folks know, hey, as radically different as your opinions are, bring them to the table. Bring them with all of your passion, because ultimately we've got to have these difficult conversations about where this country needs to go in the right way. You know, if it's going to progress in a way that's good for all of us. So who are you, Ciaran, politically? What are your passions and feelings, and how are you feeling about yourself? You know, as an American citizen and all of that in this moment in 2020, where the whole world seems to be changing.
Woo! There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I'm famous for that.
It's been fascinating to see how quickly things are changing. I was joking with someone the other day that I think everyone's a bit socialist now. Right. I saw a headline yesterday. I don't know if it was The Onion or something, but it said, reality has just endorsed Bernie Sanders. And, you know, obviously that's tongue in cheek, but, you know, when you have the Republican Party coming out in full-throated support of a $2 trillion stimulus, obviously the game has changed a little bit. And I think that the current moment, the current crisis, the current economic calamity that is ongoing and will probably get worse, obviously present incredible challenges for our politics, but also incredible opportunity. And I think at an elite level, you did see the Democrats and the Republicans come together in relatively short order to pass a emergency economic support package that will ensure that folks who are being laid off, folks who are worried about paying rent, worried about getting groceries, worried about when they might find employment again, are at least going to get a little bit of relief. And I'm convinced and hopeful that that support will continue, because I think this might be a bit of a long haul.
Right.
It's interesting to think about the counterfactual of how would this have played out if Barack Obama were president and the coronavirus crisis happened and Mitch McConnell were leading the Senate.
And in the interest of disclosure, Ciaran O'Connor is a man who worked at a pretty respectable level for both the Obama campaign in 2012 and the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016, correct?
That is correct. And
which, as I recall, was a lot of fun until it ended.
That's right.
I'm stealing Ciaran's line there.
That seems like a lifetime ago.
Jeez, it does, doesn't it?
But, it's interesting to think about the counterfactual, because the cynic in me, I have a cynic and an idealist in me, like a better angel and a worse devil, a braver angel, I should say.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about the counterfactual, because the cynic in me says that, well, if Barack Obama were president, who knows if the Republicans would have wanted to pass a stimulus. Maybe they would have wanted to blame Barack Obama for the economic collapse. Maybe you would have had Republican governors in red states instructing their citizens not to listen to federal guidelines about social distancing and say, you're going to let this Democrat, this black Democrat, tell you not to go to restaurants and not to go to bars.
Right.
So that's the cynic in me. But the idealist says that people can come together in this time of crisis. And I think you're seeing that. Red and blue governors, they're putting politics aside, because this is about saving lives. Right. And this is about protecting our country's future. I think that when it comes to President Trump, I think regardless of how you feel about him and whether you are appalled or delighted by his approach to politics and by his approach to people on the other side, I think that it's clear that where Trump is most comfortable, his most familiar, comfortable posture is one of dividing. He does not seem particularly comfortable in the moments that call for unity. It does not seem to come easy for him, the idea of humility and reconciliation and self-reflection and calling for unity. I think it's been interesting to see how he's responded to this crisis, because unlike a lot of things, the math and science do not care about pronouncements. You had him at the beginning saying, this is just like the flu. It's going to disappear like a miracle. Wishful thinking, some might call it, natural optimism. And then he seemed to be a bit chastened and humbled by the public health predictions and called for social distancing. And then a week later, you had him out there questioning, is the cure worse than the disease? Might the economic ramifications of the COVID-19 restrictions be worse than the public health considerations?
And let us know in the comments, folks, what do you think about Trump's handling of the COVID-19 crisis so far? I think we'd love to hear from you. But yeah, brother, keep going.
And I think you saw that playing out in the media as well. I think you had a lot of folks on the right who were questioning whether the restrictions might outweigh the effect of the disease itself. And it quickly became politicized in itself, because you had folks saying that Democrats in the media were using coronavirus as a way to impugn the president and essentially reduce his chances of being reelected. Now we've gotten to a point, it seems, where folks have come around to the reality. And so I'm hopeful that we can get back to the point of uniting in the face of a challenge that truly is grave. that truly is grim and that truly requires collective action.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing about a contagious pandemic like this is that when there's one or two weak links, when you have a few people who ignore the guidelines and go out and spread the disease,
mm-hmm.
it affects everybody. And so in that respect, this is a unique challenge and a unique opportunity. And in order to take advantage of the situation to create lasting positive change, what that requires more than anything, I think, is courage.
Right.
The courage to withstand the injury and invective and vitriol that will be inevitably hurled at you by those on the other side of the aisle. And so too the tribal judgment and pressure that you'll hear from your own side, who are just castigating the others as just completely self-interested demons, which is not true and which is a fairly low view of humanity to which I hope I do not sink.
Man, but I like the way you said that, though. The courage to withstand the injury, invective, and vitriol. And which is a crazy alliteration, because that's I-V, and then V. Anyway, let me not get off track. Now, brother, I hear everything that you're saying, and I appreciate your forthrightly laying out the kind of the perspective of both the cynic and the idealist in you, right? Because I think that we all have that. I mean, personally, I do hear what you're saying about wondering if Obama had been president, would Republican governors and state administrations and so forth and other conservative commentators have been preaching as much cooperation. I would like to think that under the circumstances they would. I don't know. It's hard to underestimate American partisanship in either direction from my point of view. I mean, I do think that it's been a little bit interesting to see just in a casual way, as I've observed it, seeming to see, I think, commentators and publications on the left, hammer the president for not having taken things maybe as seriously as he should have up front, when I think that there are a lot of publications that were, and liberal-leaning commentators who are claiming that, this might not be much worse than the flu to begin with. Of course, none of those people are president of the United States, but there's an easy way for us to kind of seize in on the mistakes of the other side, even in a context where you'd like to think we could transcend politics, as a means of seizing political advantage, But look, I take all of this stuff in as just another guy. I never want to present myself as being as being an extraordinary expert on every facet of our conversation, right? And I think it's important of our national political conversation. And I think it's important to say that because one of the things that makes it harder, I think, for us to come together as a people is the pressure we all feel to present ourselves as experts on various things. Experts. We're all an epidemiologist. We're all professional political or economic analysts. We all have in-depth opinions on all sorts of things that don't necessarily we don't have the bandwidth to master. Like
they have. I was just going to say, it seems like a lot of journalists suddenly have MD, PhDs.
Well, yeah, precisely. It's a common thing. But this is just the tension of the moment. See, the best you can say about me, man, is that I'm just sort of like an amateur philosopher. That's all I can even grasp at. I try to be well-rounded, in terms of how I interact with the larger conversation. And what I see is, I think, in alignment with what your idealistic side sees, Ciaran, which is that I think that in spite of all of the obvious dysfunctions right now, I think that people are, trying to come together. I mean, I looked on Twitter, this morning, and I saw Ben Shapiro retweeting an article about Chris Cuomo, CNN host, brother of Mario Cuomo, New York governor, Democratic governor.
Andrew Cuomo.
I'm sorry,
Mario
Andrew Cuomo,
Cuomo
not
was
Mario
the father,
Cuomo.
the OG.
That's right, the OG, Mario Cuomo. Yeah, Andrew Cuomo, pardon me. Andrew Cuomo is governor of New York. His brother Chris, CNN host, just tested positive for COVID-19. And that's a person who I think, a guy like Shapiro is likely to be critical of about 99% of the time. But he tweeted out wishing him a speedy recovery and reminded his listeners that we're all in this together. And I think I've seen similar sorts of overtures coming from personalities on the left. You see Joe Biden speaking on Meet the Press. I think it's clear that he's trying to sort of adopt something of a diplomatic way of criticizing President Trump, where on the one hand, he's strident in his critiques, but on the other hand, he's trying not to convey a sense that he's seeking to undermine the president as the president is trying to navigate us through a crisis. I think that people are trying because we recognize the fact that lives really are on the line, right? And it's not just the fact that lives are on the line, but our way of life is on the line. I mean, we certainly are looking at a situation, just to be honest, right, in the United States right now, where we might experience, Dr. Fauci, who, Ciaran, could you give us Fauci's credentials really quick? He is the, what is Anthony Fauci's official position?
Anthony Fauci, he is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and he is a great personality. I've been comforted by the fact that he's still there.
Yeah,
there was a brief period 2 weeks ago when I got a little worried that Trump was going to fire him because Anthony Fauci was out there, giving interviews about how, sometimes he has to correct the president and whatnot. But it seems like that's been resolved. And so,
Dr. Fauci has arisen as America's sort of most trusted personality and authority on the subject of the virus here, working closely with the White House response, COVID-19 response task force. And he has stated now, the White House has projected a plausible scenario wherein we suffer between 100 and 240,000 deaths as a consequence of COVID-19. Depending on how we react to it, according to the authorities, it could be substantially worse, or maybe there's a scenario in which it is better. But even putting aside the number of deaths that might occur as a result of this, you're going to have people who get sick in much greater numbers, who do not die, but who suffer as a consequence of this disease, and maybe even endure some lasting health complications because of it. And then even beyond that, we have what is already the reality of significant economic contraction as a result of the fact that we've had to take extreme measures as a society to respond to this pandemic. And so even after we get over the actual hump of the virus itself, we're looking at a circumstance where we may have millions more unemployed Americans and businesses that have closed, and a dramatic drop in annual productivity and our ability to fund government programs. And that's to say nothing of changes that are taking place in the global economy. And so, when we talk about bravery, when we talk about courage, let's just celebrate the courage of the actual first responders who are making themselves available to work in crowded and resource depleted hospitals, and particularly major population centers across the United States. And let's give some thanks and some props to the service workers and all sorts of industries, people who are working in delivery and transportation and all sorts of other areas to sort of keep life going in America in a way that is kind of recognizable. And then, let's think a little bit about the courage that's going to be required on the part of us as a people, as members of families, neighborhoods, communities, to support folks who might have a difficult time getting by financially, among other reasons, right? In the aftermath of this pandemic, whenever it ultimately slows down. And finally, let's acknowledge the fact that us all having to be cooped inside for so long is going to have tremendous consequences for our social health and our mental health in many respects too. We have to be willing to be there for each other in all of these different ways, and all of these different ways require, yes, empathy and compassion, but also, I think, courage to really commit to as an American people. And so, as we look at the political conversation, I think part of the question is, is the political culture, is it making it easier for us to step up and support each other in that way, or is it making it harder for us to do that? And I think it's a mixed bag, Ciaran, I think. But I also think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful, including the work that we're doing, here at Braver Angels. So there's all sorts of opportunity and need for courage right now.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. And I think what people are going to see, people who come to our programming online, who participate in our online debates, is they're going to see a marked contrast between what we're doing and between some of the more cynical and depraved voices on social media that are trying to exploit this crisis to drive their own political agendas. In a Braver Angels debate, you are encouraged to speak your mind, not to hold back, to advocate and articulate and activate, but to do so
more impressive alliteration. Thank you, sir.
I had to do it. But I think that you can have both. You can be able to talk about politics in a way in which you offer tough criticism and tough-minded points about how you feel, and that can include criticism of the president or criticism of the Democrats or criticism of certain policies that you think are too restrictive or you think were too late in the game, or criticism of folks you think who should have been listening to the experts like Dr. Fauci, when they were warning of this 3 months ago. I mean, there's all sorts of reasonable and justified critiques that can be levied. But the question is, what is the motivation behind those critiques? Is it to advance an argument and to try to advance truth and ultimately reconciliation? Or is it to embarrass, humiliate, demean,
right,
and ultimately define down the opponent? And that's where I think you're going to see a contrast. And so I think people who are interested in seeing, well, what does this notion of courage mean? I mean, it's all good to use this high-minded, lofty language about courage and bravery and the need to come together. I mean,
I hate lofty language, Ciaran. I hate it. I hate lofty language. Yeah,
I know you do, John, and I pity the fool that thinks your remarks are simply platitudinous.
Indeed. Thank you for that.
In fact, they are ideals for a reason. Right. Yeah. I mean, the ideals of our nation were always lofty. That's sort of why they were able to inspire so many people, even if they've been a disappointment to many people who felt that we have not been able to live up to them, and maybe we might not ever be able to live up to them. That's another debate entirely. But I think if you really want to see what does courage look like in a concrete and tangible way, it's people across the nation who are now, for the most part, at home, stuck on their computers, feeling scared, feeling isolated, feeling despondent, feeling frustrated at what they're seeing online, coming together to talk about politics, not in a necessarily mushy or therapeutic way where they're papering over differences, but in a way in which they're making strong points to their neighbors because they care about their neighbors, not because they want to dominate their neighbors.
Right. That's right. And so these conversations that we're having at Braver Angels, these debates that we're conducting and the different formats and programs that we have on offer. I mean, most people who are familiar with our organization, who are familiar with Better Angels, already know this, but we don't just host debates. We host workshops that are meant to educate people in terms of how we communicate more effectively and empathetically across political differences. We have workshops and offerings that show people how to sort of monitor your own internal conversation to make you a more efficient kind of communicator of the sorts of your own beliefs and articulations and convictions in the context of difficult conversations. But our debates and all of these other programs and offerings, these aren't the ends in and of themselves of our works. They are themselves means to a greater end, and that greater end is strengthening the social fabric of this country and building up really an organizing infrastructure that allows us to impact the culture of institutions in American life that have to function well if we're going to be able to sort of stabilize our broader socio-political society in a way that maintains progress and prosperity and essential sort of social unity as much as possible. to be able to leave these things to further to subsequent generations, right? And so prior to the change that we all have, that we are all here experiencing with COVID-19 and the need for us to sort of lock ourselves indoors, our activities were out there in physical reality, out there in grassroots. I mean, we have 1,000 volunteers across the country holding workshops and debates, but also coming together in local alliances in various communities to organize around political issues that achieve a level of care and concern and interest from folks across the party line. We have alliances and volunteers and people working on college and university campuses. We have programs for members of Congress and their staffs and leagues of mayors and other elected officials, and a whole lot more. And the reason I mention all of that is just to say that this period of time where we find ourselves inside, where we find ourselves locked at our computers, where life has slowed down for most of us so dramatically. I'm saying this to Braver Angels members, and also to just folks in the wider audience and in the wider world who I hope become interested in what it is we're doing here. This is an opportunity for those of us who have the space to kind of focus in this direction, to think about how we can use this time to invest it in sort of re-educating ourselves and reorienting ourselves in terms of our relationships with one another, to lay the groundwork for us to be able to build society back up in all of these different ways, rebuilding the social relationships of the American people, rebuilding the political stability of American society, rebuilding the economic prosperity of this country. This is a time for us to build the relationships and the skills and the connections necessary to be able to do that as life begins to shift back eventually into something of a more sort of normal kind of set of circumstances, right? Because the truth is that things are probably never going to return back to normal entirely. One way or another, this is a moment of American history that is going to, for better or worse, have some lasting effects, I think, on our country. This is something that we are all going to remember, and it's going to have an impact going forward. But the nature of its impact on us, what we choose to do with this time and with this challenge that's staring us in the face in the context, too, of this 2020 election and beyond, it's up to us to make a decision as to what we want to make of that. And for us here at Braver Angels, for our members, our leaders, our volunteers and folks, and for you in the audience, I'm hoping, this is a time for us to rebuild the fundamentals of our understanding, our shared understanding of what it means to be an American and to build with each other, red and blue, right and left, liberal, progressive, conservative, libertarian, Republican, Democrat, independent, etc., right? To build together on an evolving understanding of just what sort of amazing opportunities the future may hold for us if we are able to give birth to a shared understanding that comes from a place of mutual conviction and patriotic empathy and well-regard from one side of us to the other, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we've got to find that, if America is going to be America, I think. And so, brother, we are, I think, coming to the end of our time here. Do we want to leave the audience with some pressing announcements, information? We've got a Braver Angels debate coming up Thursday. What is the date going to be? The Thursday that this podcast comes out. Thursday the 10th.
Thursday the 9th.
Thursday the 9th. Damn it. Thursday the 9th. I don't have my calendar in front of me. And you will see, if you visit our website, social media, and actually we can maybe even include a link in the description, information on how to get involved with that, how to be a part of the conversation. And so keep up with us. Braver Angels is moving forward quickly, aggressively. There's no time to lose. We are building a house united. Ciaran, why don't you leave them with some wisdom?
I think it's a call to courage in a time of crisis. And I think that this is when people's true mettle is revealed. Adversity reveals genius and compassion. I was in Manhattan in September of 2001 after the 9/11 attacks. I saw the way that New York responded, the way the country responded and came together. I also saw some of the long-term political and economic ramifications of 9/11 and how those have shaped our politics and our culture to date. I think we can learn from the past and we can look to the future. And I think that groups like Braver Angels and all the organizations that are trying to use this again as an opportunity to unite us and build on what unites us rather than weaponize the crisis for their own ends. Those are the people that we can look to as leaders, and those are the people that we can become ourselves. And Braver Angels ultimately is a grassroots movement, and it's about empowering Americans across the political, ideological, capital, social, demographic, geographic spectrum. Regardless, if you believe in your neighbor, if you believe in your country, if you believe in yourself, and you want to see us overcome this challenge, maybe check out Braver Angels, see if it's right for you. If you're already a member of Braver Angels, maybe consider upping your membership, maybe consider organizing your own debate, maybe consider coming on the podcast. We'd love to have you, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Until next time, brother.
Peace.